6:35 on Newsradio 1000 KTOK. Senator James Lankford now joins us from Washington, D.C. And good morning, Senator. Sounds like you got a new BFF. In the form of George Will, I mean.
Yeah, well, George Will was very kind on it. I thought you were talking about John Kerry in my conversation with him yesterday.
I saw the complimentary words that George Will gave you in your policy towards the OCR, and we can get into your comments with the Secretary in just a minute. But what is the OCR, and what was it that got George Will's attention?
Well, this is Office of Civil Rights. This is Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights. It's a group that has a great name and is standing up for a tremendous American value. The problem is how they're doing it and what they're doing is a major problem. It's a huge overreach from this administration. I know that may be a surprise to a lot of people to see this administration's overreaching. But what they've tried to do is they've tried to say, well, under the auspices of civil rights, we think these guidelines are necessary. The problem is Congress hasn't passed it. It's not been instilled in law, so they're literally creating new law, new regulations with no backing. And so I've confronted them to say, hey, these are all nice ideas. They're just not law, and so you can't just go impose them on schools. And whether it be secondary schools or whether it be higher education in colleges, I hear the same complaint over and over again. They have tremendous power over the schools where they can literally, for colleges, open them or close them based on the decisions of the Office of Civil Rights. No one wants to challenge them because they're afraid of the retribution that will happen onto their school, but they absolutely need to be challenged and pushed back in some of the policies that they're putting in place.
Well, or encouraging, because I noticed OU's engineering department yesterday was found to be handing out a bunch of, I think they're little bitty red footprints around campus promoting diversity and basically anti-white.
Well, and the challenge is on a university campus, you want there to be open dialogue. You want there to be open diversity. You want to be able to talk about hard subjects in a safe place. But the Office of Civil Rights is limiting conversation about hard subjects in safe places. And the safe place is a university that has open, diverse speech, not limited speech. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to just push back in a simple way. And George Will noticed some of the work that we're doing and some of the back and forth that we've had with the Department of Education, and he was very kind to be able to highlight some of it in his latest piece. But the issue still remains the same. It is a good thing for us to have diversity in America. It's a bad thing for any administration to make up laws as they go and go implement them. And when the law professors from Harvard University and others are pushing back and saying this administration's gone too far, I'm fairly confident they've gone too far.
Senator James Lankford on Newsradio 1000 KTOK. All right, let's get to your other BFF then, the Secretary.
Well, yesterday I had Secretary John Kerry that was in front of one of the committees that I sit on, and my line of question circled around Iran and around Libya and what's happening, some of the drug trafficking that's coming out of Mexico and what the State Department is doing there. Large poppy fields are being cultivated in Mexico. This is not some secret drug of meth that's being cooked up in some lab that no one can see. You can see poppy fields from the air. And so I would expect the State Department to work with Mexico because we have a tremendous amount of heroin pouring into the United States now. And with Iran, I visited with the intelligence chair, Clapper, the Obama's intelligence chair, Jim Clapper, just 2 weeks ago. And during that conversation, I asked him, has there been any change in Iran's behavior since the Iran nuclear deal that the president did, dealing with terrorism, dealing with their ballistic missile program, any of those things? And he said, no, there's been no change. So I asked Secretary Kerry the same thing. Do you agree with D&I Clapper that there's been no change? And the Secretary had to agree as well. No, Iran's made no change in their work towards terrorism and ballistic missile program. But he did say, we've seen progress in nuclear area, but they're still advancing the same way they always have in terrorism, the same way they always have in their ballistic program, and they're trying to keep those two things separate. I'm pretty confident in Iran they don't keep those two things separate.
I am as well. Senator James Lankford on Newsradio 1000 KTOK. I haven't had a chance to ask you since this weekend, but did you get a chance to I know you probably were a big fan of Justice Scalia. Did you have a chance to pay your respects?
You know what? I was not in town during that time period. I was actually in Oklahoma during that time period when the service happened here for Justice Scalia. But yes, sir, huge fan of Justice Scalia, both his writing, the way he articulated the issues, even his dissents. When he was on the losing side of it, his dissents were famous for how clear they were to be able to shred the legal argument of the other side to say this is not a preference. And in his absolute way that he would hold very strong to his convictions, but still be friendly to people that he disagreed with. And he is one of those folks in Washington we talk about there's not very many of, and now there's one less. There was no one clearer on conservative principles and clear Constitution than Justice Scalia, but he had no issue being friendly to liberals on the court and to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a longtime friend, and to others. He treated everyone fairly and friendly, but he held tenaciously fast to his conservative principles, and it will be incredibly difficult to replace in the court, and I'm very confident this president will not pick someone in that vein.
And along those lines, I'm not going to argue whether or not he should. It's it's constitutionally stated. But your thoughts on approval of that nominee?
Oh yeah, the president's free to be able to nominate whoever he chooses. That's his constitutional responsibility. But the president and a lot of liberals that I've heard on the media have tried to portray this as this is the president's sole job to pick it. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution shows very clearly this is a 50-50 responsibility between the Senate and the President. The President makes the first selection. The Senate gives advice or consent or not. The shall in that clause is the President shall nominate someone. There is no shall clause related to advice and consent from the Senate. So the Senate has 50% of the responsibility, whether they approve or don't approve, or they act or don't act. And even Harry Reid a few years ago said the Senate has no responsibility to do hearings or to be able to work through the process for any nominee that the president puts up. Those are Harry Reid's words from a few years ago. Mm-hmm. So the fact that many people push on this constitutional issue is true on the president shall nominate, is not true on the Senate shall then go ahead and put them onto the bench. So we'll take a look at whoever may be, but I don't anticipate anyone is going to move on the bench under this president, because this is not about personalities. This is about the balance of the court for a generation.
And it doesn't sound to me, even though the president is saying he's going to rapidly make a nomination, it doesn't look like to me he's moving very fast on it. But that's just me. Senator James Lankford, thanks for joining us on News Radio 1000 KTOK.